Heaven is in my heart, Part 4, Sacraments, Chapter 7, Holy Orders. Reference, Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 1533 to 1600. At the Last Supper, Jesus instituted the sacrament of priesthood or the Holy Orders. The apostles had successors, and the power and authority that Jesus had given them was transmitted to the successors by the laying on of hands. This has occurred over the centuries, so today's bishops are the new apostles who govern us in union with the chief apostle, who is the Bishop of Rome, the Pope. The Pope is the successor of Peter, the leader of the apostles. Jesus himself conferred this privileged office on Peter when he called Peter the rock on which he would build his church. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the powers of death shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Matthew chapter 16, verse 18 to 19. The office of Peter and the Pope is prefigured in the Old Testament in the office of the Prime Minister of the King. The Prime Minister was the one who had the keys to the treasures of the kingdom and was given the authority to loose or bind. We read about this in the book of Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 22, verse 22. And I will place on his shoulder the keys of the house of David. He shall open and none shall shut, and he shall shut and none shall open. So when Jesus spoke of giving the keys of his kingdom to Peter, it was understood that Peter was being given leadership over the other apostles and all the faithful disciples of Jesus. From this authority given by Jesus himself, the church, under the guidance of the Holy Spirit and the leadership of the Pope and the bishops, determine the moral teachings of the church and also have the monumental task of protecting the deposit of faith for over 2,000 years. After his resurrection, Jesus confirmed Peter's leadership by asking Peter 3 times if he loved him. And when Peter said yes, Jesus asked Peter to feed the lambs and the sheep. The lambs and sheep represent the members of the church. In the sacrament of holy orders, the priest lives out the mystical marriage between Jesus and his church. Jesus is not only the head of the church but also the bridegroom of the church. Even though it was not always a requirement, priestly celibacy is a beautiful calling and a grace where the priest is married to the church in a mystical way and hence does not have a wife and family in this world. Priests today are called to live a life of celibacy because of the tremendous outpouring of graces their sacrifice brings to all mankind from their life of holiness and devotion to the church. A priest's life of sacrifice is only made possible by the supernatural grace he receives during his priestly ordination to live a life dedicated completely to the service of God and his people. Ordination leaves an indelible mark on the ordained priest, so a priest always remains a priest even if he is unable to carry out the promises and vows he made during his ordination. The priest once ordained is permanently transformed into the person of Christ and becomes a visible representative of Jesus, who is the head of the church. Priestly vocation cannot be taken lightly. It is a calling and it is not a job or a profession. A person who has a vocation to priesthood is set apart by God himself and will only be truly at peace when he discovers for himself his priestly vocation through prayer and discernment. So it's extremely important for us to pray for young men who show signs of having a calling to priesthood. When we meet such an individual, if we are prayerful, the Holy Spirit will prompt us to pray that He can discern His vocation with divine assistance and say yes to His calling, as Peter did.